The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. So first things first, I should introduce myself. My name is Amy Omang and I am with ASPA. So I recognize several names that we have with us today, but there are some newcomers here. I want to welcome everybody and thank you for taking your time to come with us today. A couple other things before we get to like the fun part and why we're here, right? So a couple of housekeeping announcements, especially if you're new to this. I want you to be familiar with what you're seeing on your screen. So everybody has a control panel on the right-hand side of their screen. A couple things to take note of here is that orange icon, the orange arrow that points to the right. If you hit that, that's going to open and close the larger control panel, depending upon your view, how you'd prefer to view that. And then there's also a hand icon. And you guys, I want you to really pay attention to that one because a little later we want to hear from you. We'd love to hear your voice. And if you want to share your questions or comments or thoughts at the appropriate time, you hit that hand icon and that lets me know that you want to speak verbally and I will call you by first name and unmute you. Okay, so you also see a questions pane on that control panel. If you'd rather write a question or comment than speak verbally, that's great too. So you would type your question or comment in there and we will address it at the appropriate time. Also, just if you have any technical issues, you can type them in there and I'll work with you on the back end. We'll just kind of work together in the back end and figure out how we can help you. So let's get to the awesome faces that we see on the screen. These are our experts today. I want to first say thank you to CAP, the Center for Accountability and Performance. We have with us our first expert, Michael Jacobson, who is in today's role going to be sort of the moderator of this discussion. He's got all sorts of great things I could say about him, but he wanted me to keep it short, so I will. Michael's the Deputy Director for Performance and Strategy in the Office of Performance Strategy and Budget at King County, Washington. He's a previous winner of the ASPA Center for Accountability and Performance's Harry Hattrey Distinguished Performance Measurement and Management Practice Award. That is a lot to say, but it's an awesome award. Yes, it is. And he currently, and has for several years, serves on the board of the Center for Accountability and Performance. So wish I could say more, but he won't let me. So I'm going to turn it over to Michael. Michael, welcome.
Thank you, Amy, and welcome everyone for joining us today. I am really honored to be here today to get us started on this webinar. So one of the responsibilities of being a CAP board member is to host a webinar, and I am really honored to bring to you today this amazing pair of Larisa Benson and Chelsea Lay. I have personally gotten to work with them. Their bios are online. I'm going to eschew that. They've led performance management programs. They've worked as auditors. They've worked in state and county government. They've got all the street cred they need. But more fun than that is that they are putting the word joy and government in the same sentence together. This is not usual. It's typical. Maybe it's not even expected. And my interactions with them over the years have been profound and thought-provoking and continue to invigorate my work. As many of you may know, working in government isn't always smiles and hearts, and day to day keeping your spirit up and keeping the long view is a very important thing. So the fact that Larisa and Chelsea have been working on the content, you know, they create dashboards and things like that, but they also get you thinking about why you're here and what's motivating you and how do you do better work. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Larisa and Chelsea, and we will be online here with our videos. This was an important part of you being able to see us today and see some interaction, and look forward to your questions. Feel free to use the question pane in the email, and we'll address those as appropriate. So Larisa and Chelsea, welcome.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's really joyful to be invited to present by a good friend and a respected colleague, Michael. I'm really honored that you would invite both of us. We've learned a lot from working with you and with each other. Chelsea Lay and myself are co-creators of this thing, and that's actually one of the most important lessons that we learned, is that no one really does this alone. When you're trying to create something and push the frontiers of what is possible, it is really important to not go it alone and to go with trusted colleagues and peers, and that is part of the story that we'll be sharing with you today. And I got to say, I think the real reason that we were invited is that a couple months ago, Richard Green and Catherine Barrett, just fabulous journalists and thought leaders in this field, friends of ours as well, were doing a column, and they had called up and they were having this sort of internal discussion about why performance kind of strikes fear in some people's hearts and kind of holds them back from improving. There's just something about audits and performance and the field that we are in that makes people sit up a little straighter, which is great, but also makes them shrink a little bit from looking at their own data. And so when Richard heard the word joy, he kind of gave me that little, you know, I don't know if any of you are dog lovers, but you get that kind of little German Shepherd kind of look, a little bit of a double take, like, wait a minute, did you say joy in government? I haven't heard those two words together. And what you're seeing here is a blog post from the UK Center for Public Impact and this story that we wrote for them. And I'm a big fan of emotional intelligence. And joy is the emotion that is associated with purpose. The whole concept of being in alignment with your purpose, and you're in the public sector, we are all about the purpose and the people that we serve. Being in alignment, being in flow, that actually has an emotional, a neuroscientific connection to the emotion of joy. So we're going to be telling you the story of how we found that out. We actually didn't start out that way. We discovered it as we went. It was emergent. And I want to turn it over to Chelsea to tell the next part of our story.
Thank you, Larisa. Hi, everybody. Thank you for tuning in today. So, as Michael mentioned, I started out my career in government as an auditor at King County. And I went to one of the first Government Performance Consortium events that Larisa organized. And she said a phrase that just captured my imagination. And she said, we exist to transform government from the inside out. And so that became a really fascinating question that I just wanted to find out the answer to. How might we transform government from the inside in order to bring forth the future of high-performance government that we all want? So this 3 years later, these are the 7 shifts to that question that we posed to ourselves. And as in the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to explain each of them to you. And so I will turn it back to Larisa to explain what do we mean by these shifts to transform government from the inside out.
Thanks. Chelsea, this is going to be a bit of a conversation, folks, just so that you're aware and prepared for this. As we get going, Michael, Chelsea, and I tend to interrupt each other and want to make extra points, and we welcome that, because actually we learned that that's part of innovation, that is actually where good ideas come from, is from people bandying back and forth. And you can see a few pictures from some of our events right here. We must be doing something right, because now we have over 2,000 people following us, representing over 150 of the 285 cities and 39 counties across our state. And this is what they're doing. You can see them. They're sharing their ideas. They're figuring stuff out. We're not just sitting there. We always have a little bit of a lecture, a little bit of a thought leader to provoke new thinking, which is part of our recipe we'll share with you later. But really, just like our conversation today and the part where we're looking forward to your questions and answers, this is something that we build together. So the second audacious question, and the part that Chelsea didn't mention to you, and I hope this is okay to share, Chelsea just quit this job at the auditor's office after she had just got published, you know, in Alga, and she was like the superstar of the millennial generation of auditors joining government and coming out of Stanford and Harvard, and why did she choose government and all this stuff. And she just took this leap of faith. And we just have continued to ask each other these powerful questions, these lines of inquiry that lead to this research. And in a minute, you're going to see the amazing research design that she does. But I was sort of really curious about this question. So what learning becomes possible when there's a common dashboard for cities and counties? It's kind of an audacious question. It's kind of an audacious question to say, hey, everybody, I think we're kind of pointing toward the same true north. I think we could do a little research and help you out with the compass settings, and then we can do less freaking out about whether we have the right measures and more of a conversation about what are we learning along the way. What are we learning along the way as we strive to close these gaps in our society for which no single government agency is solely responsible, but toward which we are all striving with all of our might. And speaking of all of our might, I got to show you, you know, we stand on the shoulders of giants. And Chris Gregoire is, I don't think she just barely clears 5 feet. But if you've ever been in her presence, she's got a huge presence. And she was a big inspiration to me. And my friendship with Michael sort of began while I was working for Governor Gregoire. And she was a governing magazine public official of the year, and for good reason. Man, did she love to measure. She loved to measure stuff. She liked to get right down in the data. She's truly one of us in terms of, if I can make assumptions about the ASPA Center for Accountability Performance. Geeks are cool. Geeks are cool in my tribe, so I hope you all don't mind if I call us all geeks. But she was like the ultimate super nerd. She would go right down into the data. And what I realized in retrospect, even though we just kept using this word performance, I know that's a really important word in the lexicon for ASPA and CAP as well. The subtle shift here is we're talking about performance, but only as a reflection of purpose, right? It's not the performance measures themselves. It's the fact that they highlight and make a little bit more crisp and clear what our purpose is and how we would know if we were achieving it. So her policy priorities, and she was really serious. She was a very funny person, but she was really serious about performance in the public sector. And she got right down to business, and we were able to make some pretty statistically significant improvements. We were able to bend the curve on child abuse. We were able to slow down that revolving door that our prisons have become. We achieved the lowest highway fatality rate in our state's history. And we're bringing down healthcare costs at a time where that was really bucking the trend, because they were going up then and they're still going up. But if I could just tell a little bit of a story about this. You know, I spent not this last decade, but the decade before, really dedicating myself to the study of lean management. And I was just fascinated with everything that came out of Japan, but especially their expression of this. And what I realized is when it was translated from Japan to America, we lost a lot of the cultural context. A lot was lost in translation. And so when you think about the American ethic and how interested we are in individual achievement and freedom, and how much it takes a whole village to actually achieve these kinds of results, you can kind of start to see why the shift from performance to purpose is important. Because purpose is something we all share. Performance is something that we tend to think about as an individual reflection, and that actually gets in the way of measuring and improving performance, which is something we'll talk about a little bit later. I think I want to hand this back to Chelsea, but I just want to tell you why. It's because I had this light bulb moment, and ever since I started working with Chelsea, I was able to see what I was doing in ways that I couldn't see until I met her. And she had this little flint spark that illuminated this insight for me that while in lean, we're talking about waste, and then we wonder why people don't like us walking in and saying, hey, we think there's 80% waste here and we could improve this. While the methodologies of lean are very sound and actually what we used to turn these curves, that particular frame was a real turnoff for folks. And Chelsea's research and really listening to what we were talking about is what gave us the first insight about this idea waste and what kind of waste we're really talking about.
Indeed. So I would say my part of the origin story is that when we first started, Larisa and I, we knew that we were onto something new, something important, but we didn't have the language to describe what we were sensing. And so we tried different methods, and this is an artifact of one of our brainstorming sessions of how do we really depict the current state that we see and feel and interact with in government. And so what you're seeing here is that we kind of think of ourselves as having a privileged position of being these two little airplanes that are flying over the landscape of government and looking at what's going on. And so a couple of details I just want to highlight in this 3D sculpture is you see infrastructure, you see not a lot of money, things are kind of old compared to over here, what we represent as private sector. But what we were really trying to explain in this model are the kind of dark and nebulous feeling of waste, and we call that emotional waste as opposed to waste of money or time, because we think that that is something real, and it is pervasive. It affects productivity and performance and meaning when people come to work in government. And by emotional waste, we're really talking about just unproductive feelings of things like fear, shame, and just cynicism, from having to put up with a lot of change without understanding why. And so we feel like a lot of the reasons that governments are stuck, that performance management strategies haven't quite worked, have a lot to do with the emotional, the social dimensions of things in the work of government. And so we wanted to, so we were thinking, okay, what does it mean to transform government from the inside out? And if this is something important, then what would the future look like? What's the future we're trying to shift toward? And so we landed on the frame of joy. And when we talk about joy, if you read our article, we're not talking about just when things are going well, you're just feeling happy, and we're talking about the feeling of flow when you're mastering your craft. And what does high performance mean if it's not just when you're doing what you care about, you're doing it really well, and then you're constantly improving. So that's the sense in which we see the future of government is a joyful one. And what we really need to help one another is to discover and highlight and enhance that sense of joy when we come to work to improve government and outcomes for the communities that we serve.
Yeah,
so,
I love that, Chelsea. That's just, well, I was thinking about government practitioners like athletes or musicians, and about Daniel Pink's theory of motivation and this idea that we all have a creative spark inside of us. It's just that our culture doesn't kind of hold up the humble public servant, doesn't get the sort of adulation that a star violinist or a star basketball player does. But we actually do have public sector heroes. We have methodologies. We have routines that we practice, and we really want to get good at it. So somebody's given a little feedback there, but any rate, so we kind of, part of the way that we started originally, and this kind of gets back to Michael, is that, Michael and I have created a lot of stuff because we call each other up at 11 p.m. and go, hey, I got this crazy idea. You got a minute? Listen. Because we're striving for these great leaps forward, and we want our colleagues to experience the same. And so we have collected some really great masters, people who are masters of their field, and we said, let's get them together. Let's bring these folks together. Let's have Ken Miller come out here and talk about taking us from public good to public great. And Ken's like, okay, I'll do it if Michael will get up on stage with me. And what do you know? Like, we had a sellout crowd in no time at all. And then we had Rebecca Ryan, who's one of the preeminent futurists in our country. And she came out, and then we had her back about a year later and for Zen leadership. And that's kind of another inside joke, because I think Michael's great joy was getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning for the silent meditation that we did every day for that workshop. Then we had Peter Kageyama come out for our Love of Cities tour, and that was another innovation. Instead of having one event with one speaker, we multiplied it into a 4-city tour, including the big gathering, and that's where we really started to get bold and actually say the word love and show hearts, because what we were recording, and you can see it in some of our videos, people are passionate. Like, they're passionately in love with their cities and the work that they do. And they just don't get that many opportunities to present it, because we're all just trying to do a good job and come before council and make our case and get our budget and, you know, hope that we can make a difference. And then we rolled into Liberating Lean and with our sister organization over in Iowa. And then we had Dietrich Epps out to measure what matters. And then we started focusing on organizational health. And building the fit organization. And then on May 1, it was just an awesome blowout event with Sid Harrell and also the women from the Center for Civic Design. And we had this event called More Human by Design. And again, we keep thinking people are going to get sick of this and not come. And then the event sells out again, and we realize we probably have to host it again. At any rate, this idea of what's important is the thought leaders are important, but training is not enough. Okay, we have this kind of delusion, like you get a degree or you do some training or you get a belt and you've got it figured out. It's not so. It has to do with practice. It's all about the practice. So Chelsea and I made another couple of great friends, Beverly and Etienne, who you see featured here. They have pioneered this work. You know, if you want to know what community of practice really means, a lot of people use that word and they don't really understand what it means. We encourage you to study with them as we did. And then we realized, hey, this is kind of what we're doing in our events. We didn't realize why they were working so well. So first you have a learning session and you have some immediate value. Hey, good learning session. You guys get good speakers. That's really exciting and interesting. But the key is that the light bulbs go on. And then we figured out, hey, if we want some of those light bulbs to go on past the training, you know, like you go back to the office and what do you do with it? We have to attend to the people who are trying to apply these ideas and really embed them inside organizations with little teams, not just one lonely person going back and going, I have an idea, can we use design thinking for innovation? No, you got to have the whole team kind of wrap around that and be supported, and you keep practicing it until you turn that curve and get that realized value. That's a really key ingredient of how we have been doing this. So yeah. You can see that we're just, oh yeah, what do you have to say about those guys?
I'd like to add that part of what we learned was that trainings are one-offs. I mean, you can have the same training over and over, but they're usually just one-offs. And what a community of practice, what distinguishes it is you are bringing people who are passionate about a practice, like something that you're actually doing for repeated interactions. And you're building up a shared repertoire of resources and tools and templates. And so people can actually learn from each other in doing something. So, and that's this, I think, the key shifts that we would like to highlight.
Yeah, that's awesome. We're just fresh off this gathering that we had a couple days ago. So one of our communities of practice is called the Dashboard Champion Circle. And this is about 50 hardcore dashboard enthusiasts. And you can see us doing exactly what we're talking about here. So every single session that we have, people want the answer to, well, how do you deal with resistance? How do you bring people on board to what we're doing? How do you remove the fear of being blamed for poor performance? It's like, instead of searching for the training that has the silver bullet answer, we just keep coming back together and watch each other have these breakthroughs and listen to one another about, oh, that's how you did it with streets management over in Tacoma. I wonder if we could do that in Renton, right? And then we're just going back and forth so that people are no longer waiting for an expert to tell them what to do. They're like, hey, I'm my own local expert. I got to get together with other people, street level bureaucrats, figuring stuff out together, and just building it piece by piece until we get better and better at it. And so that's what these folks are doing here.
Right. So one of the, as Larisa said, one of the key stucks that we see in government silos, no news, and it's interesting to see in Lean, people are doing things like value stream mapping, and well, one of the benefits of that is that you're starting to see how to the outside, people who receive the services from of government, they don't really know who's making the products of the service, but inside we seem to separate ourselves, between finance and the agencies, or between the people who hire people to who are actually doing the work. And so we wanted to again pose another powerful question: what learning becomes possible when everyone who's part of a service delivery system can see one another? And for that, I actually went and did a bit of research just about performance dashboarding efforts in our part of the country, in Washington State, and just looking at what are jurisdictions, cities and counties already doing. And I kind of think of myself as a gems collector. So I went through our various cities and look at their public-facing performance dashboards or performance reports. And I really found some really interesting, good initiatives and products. And here's a short list of them, and you can click on the links later to check them out. But what I want to highlight are two particular gems that really helped us kind of see the glimpse of the future. Like what does it really take to master fact-based government? And so one of them is the King County Finance and Business Division's value stream mapping. And so, as I was saying earlier, this is a really great example of how a municipal finance agency has been able to distill their core lines of business into 7 value streams. And they identified agencies that they interact with in producing the key services. And so in this view, you can see the whole system of the whole service delivery system and who's part of what. And another really good gem is the City of Kirkland's performance reports. And what's beautiful, you probably can't see the text, but what's going on here is that they have, for each priority area of the city, they have a very clear logic frame, right? So what does the city do, and what does that mean at the citywide level, and then what happens to the community in all immeasurable terms and with data over time. And so this really helped us in thinking about, okay, what we're really trying to do here is integration of key goals at multiple levels. So what are we talking about? We would like people to see ultimately the work of government will contribute to improvement of community conditions. And here is, as Larisa mentioned, our municipal dashboard of community indicators. So this is at the end of the day, most cities and governments are trying to contribute to these major aspects of community life. At the same time, we'd like to have a way to see how the community indicators connect with citywide performance measures. For example, here, the city of Redmond has a citywide performance measures dashboard that is a mixture of performance measures and community indicators. But that's still not enough, right? We want to see how are government departments doing, and how does that connect to the ultimate outcomes of the city and the community. And still, that doesn't really quite get, just having 2 or 3 department level indicators doesn't quite get us to the day-to-day management of government agencies. And so what we also need is an operational view. So as shown by here, we have a progress report on a couple of measures of how a particular process is working, a particular improvement project is working at the city of Squid. So what happens when you can have all four of these levels integrated to show the whole service delivery system for a major municipal service? And so here is our prototype for a couple lines of business, so finance and streets in municipal government. And so you probably can't see the small text, but what we did here was we created two generalizable frameworks of how you might align the key results and measures for finance and streets, and just to provide a template so that people can build a dashboard off of it. And here is a view of a finance dashboard using data from the city of Squim. And then, as you can see, we're showing in one view how the day-to-day operations and improvement project of improving credit card reconciliation kind of contributes to the department performance, and how that contributes to the citywide performance in credit worthiness and financial health, and ultimately the price of government, like how well the community can afford quality government services.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to take a breath here because I'm seeing Michael nod, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, Chelsea's blowing past this because she's such a genius. But Michael and I were like 2 decades trying to answer this question. Should we start from the top and go down, or the bottom and go up, right? Like over and over. And it's like, Chelsea's like, yeah, it's integrated. You got to go top down and bottom up. And people need to be able to slide up and down that line of sight. And you can't just do it theoretically. You got to have like real metrics. Okay, maybe imperfect metrics, but there's got to be like a strong connection between these things, so people are like, oh yeah, there's me. That's what I do. There I am, making our city that quality local government services. I get what that means and my place in it. It's huge. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, because you're showing those things and everybody will get the slide deck, but that's kind of a big, I don't know, what do you think, Michael? Is that like hitting home for you?
Yeah, for sure. I think we see a lot of times where people are looking for a single metric to explain everything that they're doing and that hit the needs of all these different audiences. And the reality is, you've got day-to-day operations you need to keep an eye on, and then there's the bigger stuff. Are you achieving something with all of that? And then how does that roll up to a management view and a community view? Very hard to tell that simply. You're showing, you know, different types of data here, but you're showing it in an integrated way so people can understand how the thing that I'm doing today every week is leading to that AA rating that we're, you know, keeping the price of government low. So it's very hard to see that kind of throughput from your day-to-day all the way out to a community piece on a routine basis. So I love the structure and how it ties together and helps tell the whole story.
Awesome. And one more point before I give it back to you, Chelsea. This is all in Excel. We built all of this in Excel and PowerPoint, not because we don't believe in automation, we do, but it was like a key learning in our whole dashboard circle. First, you got to start with your performance, your purpose, like what are you trying to achieve? And then you just kind of got to get crude with like paper and a clipboard to figure out what you're doing. Then you put it in Excel. You don't like buy some fancy system before you even know what to measure. And all of our stuff is open source, and it's online and available. And that was another genius stroke from Chelsea. She was just like, let's just let them download it and run it themselves. I was like, wow. Any rate, so now we got to talk about what really happens when people see their first red, yellow, and green.
Totally. Yeah, there's a big part of the story of what really happens when a government organization decides to measure performance and display the data on the dashboard. There's a lot of the human aspect of it that's not easily captured, right? And when we tell the story. And so here you're looking at a picture. I love this picture. This is at one of our municipal dashboard gatherings, and we have a lady from Squim. She was the person I partnered with to produce the demonstration finance dashboard there. And here is Steve Colchester, who is I think by far the most pioneering government dashboard expert.
He's the Duke of dashboards.
Yeah, so he developed the Washington State Transportation Improvement Dashboard, and it's fully database-driven, online, and public-facing. And so we're looking at a master practitioner in government dashboarding and a fairly early stage beginner. And so they were sharing the story of the first reaction when they saw the dashboard, and how to cope with that feeling of, wow, is this true? This is our data. We have red, yellow, and green. Oh, what's going on with our red? We know that at the City of Sequim, we've been doing a really good job with finance. That's what we tell council. That's what we tell other departments. So, but this doesn't make us look good. And so what happened was, Steve said, if you have a dashboard that's all green, it means that you're not trying hard enough, and it doesn't tell you anything. It's only when you can see the areas that you of red and green, red and yellow, is when you know, oh, I gotta pay attention. So red and yellow doesn't mean bad; it means pay attention. And so that was very, very nice moment, I thought, just of the shift from experts to peer coaches that we're talking about. Steve is a creator of government. He spent his 36 years in government and pretty much figured out how to do lean and dashboard by learning on his own, and he's evolved to a point where he can actually share a lot of wisdom with other people in government, and that's just what we find truly valuable. Creating a community of practice where people at different stages of the practice can really come together and share stories and help one another.
And you know, they had a lot of resilience because they were so authentic, right? They step into this circle, they talk about how they accidentally sent the 2014 dashboard around and everybody panicked because it had a lot of red and yellow green because they'd extended a lot of debt to build the new city hall. But nobody threw anybody under the bus. They rallied around one another and they said, you know, this is a chance for us to tell our story to council. And when the other cities watched the people, you know, like a team of 5 from Sequim talking about that, then like at the end of the evaluation that day, people said, well, what's the one thing you're going to do? And they're like, we're going to Sequimify, you know, because what really inspired them was not the darn dashboard. It was the resilience that these people showed about how we can come together as a team and tell our story. At any rate, it was cool.
Yeah, just to kind of bring that point home. So we also made a demo dashboard for street maintenance with real data from the city of Tacoma. And here you're looking at the street manager at Tacoma and the street manager at Renton talking shop. By just you know, having looked at the dashboard, they were like, oh, I see. The reason you guys are not quite meeting your target pavement condition is that you're really having a trouble you know, fully funding your maintenance program. And so again, this is what, you know, having data enables you to do, is that you can have a conversation and really and ask good questions of each other and problem solve based off, you know, each jurisdiction's own experience of their programs. So finally, I just like to wrap up here by saying earlier, I feel like I am a gems collector in doing my research for GPC. And as I reflect upon the work we've done in the last 3 years, I think the single most important lesson I learned is it's about collecting the gems that we see around us. All of us work with fabulous people in government, and they may not see each other, but we can. And so when we see really good things going on, what we can do is to help put together gem mandalas, right? To really shine light on what's working and find ways to bring them together into a form that we can all see our awesomeness. And that's what we've been trying to do with, you know, integrating the good ideas from agencies that we see, and then present a shared view of things to reflect our current state and advance that current state by doing prototypes of what could be possible if we had a common municipal dashboard or a common dashboard framework for a line of business. And so far, that's been really working for us. People are inspired. They want to take first steps, and they want to come to our events and share their experience. And so I just want to let you know that we're putting together the stories that we've collected and all of the tools that we have built into a book, and it's forthcoming. We'll publish it at the end of the month. We're calling it the Municipal Dashboard Practitioner's Manual. So it's built for people who are using dashboards, who are trying to build dashboards, and it's all having a very practical view of how do you do this and what happens when you have a dashboard, and how do you arrive at clarity of purpose and what to measure. So we'll put it on our website, and we'll be glad to hear what you think.
Awesome.
Hey, so
stay tuned for coming attractions.
Oh, sorry, this is Amy. We actually have a comment here, a question. Do you mind if I jump in before we move on a little bit to present it? Just since it's related to some of what you just, okay. So Mordu has asked, well, he says performance measurements are usually very difficult to ascertain. So to what extent do you think that the measurements amassed by these local jurisdictions that you were speaking to, Chelsea and Larisa, are actually objective? So to what extent do you think the measurements are objective? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'll take a crack at that, and then so the measurements are objective. This is data. This is the best data we have. It's verifiable data, and we did a lot of research, and by we I mean Chelsea, determining the highest validity data sources possible. Right, so we wanted to kind of remove the barrier of people worrying about not having good data, not having objective data, and that's why you could read a very detailed report of how we selected the 32 measures that we did, and also the data sources for 80% of those 32 metrics are highly verifiable, highly credible sources. However, this question of objectivity is very interesting, because just like I said, the metrics are just a shadow reflection of one's purpose. All of the fear and joy around metrics is because of how people interpret the data that they see. And that's why it's important to be ready to tell your story, to be ready to have that conversation. When we talk about shifting from scorecard to dashboard, that is really significant, because a scorecard is like a static reflection, evaluation, judgment. And guess what? Very small percentage of people get excited about that. A very large percentage of people get agitated, frustrated, and push back on that. And you can keep like pulling your hair out, or you can just acknowledge that and do a different maneuver and say, if we look at this as a dashboard and we're all trying to fly this plane together, that's a completely different orientation. We need to be interpreting that data, and we need to be Houston, we have a problem. Somebody call down to engineering, figure this out, because we need to steer this in a different direction. And so I just think there's a continuous dialogue that's happening, whether we're aware of it or not. And I think metrics and making them visible allows everybody to see what's happening at the bridge of the enterprise together in a different way, and foster that kind of conversation so that you get both the best of the objectivity of the metrics and the dialogue, the interpretation, and the responsive action to when we sense something is not right or could be better. That's what I would say.
Yeah, and I would just quote our friend Steve Borchester: performance measurement is not an event, it's an evolution. And as you develop a performance management approach and build dashboards, you will develop measures, and then you will throw them away completely as you kind of evolving your kind of maturity of how to use it to inform improvement. And what's really important, though, is to come back to this slide of establishing some kind of a common alignment between the day-to-day work and department management view and ultimately the citywide and community outcomes. And our prototyping has shown that this is possible. And what happens when you have such a framework is that it creates clarity of purpose and meaning for people. They can see, oh, this is actually very relieving to see, oh, what I do actually does line up with what I thought I joined government to do. And so, objectivity, I think it's again interesting, but it's all about sense making, and the measures will evolve as you keep asking questions of is this what we're trying to measure? Does this really matter?
Great, thank you. Yes, very good. Thanks for the question too. Yep.
Yeah, we're really grateful for the questions. I mean, we're trying to tell our story, and we're on our sort of bringing it home chapter, but the whole point is to engage in the questions. So I want to send my appreciation out to the person who asked that question and hope that we have some more really great questions. What's important, can you show the mandala again, Chelsea? Yeah, so these metaphors and understanding what we're doing and translating them into metaphors has turned out to be really powerful and important. Images and metaphors communicate so much more, so much faster than narratives and metrics, and they're both important. So flipping back to slide 30, this was a big breakthrough for my understanding of the fact that you could have, first of all, that these things already exist, right? Chelsea's out there mining for these gems, they're already there. So a lot of this is about remembering and honoring the nobility of the practice of public service and not always looking outside for the answer. And what we began to see, and it literally was like bursting out of these hierarchies that can feel very constricting and very, very silencing, in these little pockets of innovation were literally just kind of bursting through, like just this wonderful, juicy desire to experiment, to be creative, and to connect with one another. And our big aha was that these things go together. You know, there's a reason for the hierarchical structure of our government institutions, and we don't want to lose the value of structure. Structure holds us together. And the nice thing about a triangle is you can see that compass point to where we're heading. But the disadvantage is that you don't have this ability for people to connect. I mean, how joyful is it for us that the street crews come in to our performance dashboard conversations? That's huge. You know, instead of a bunch of intellectuals talking about what frontline metrics matter, we're actually having conversations and listening and taking more of an ethnographer's stance, respecting and understanding the real work of government. So that was just a huge breakthrough, this idea that we're all kind of bursting forward with our own creativity and appreciation and letting those two structures breathe and integrate together. And that was emergent, right? That wasn't obvious, but it was there the whole time. So let's talk about emergence.
Yeah, speaking of leading from the emerging future, there is a very helpful conceptual model and practical process and set of tools that we discover as Larisa and I were trying to figure out what is the future of government that we want to bring forth and how do we do that. And so it's called Theory U, named after this process as a U shape. And when we talk about transformation, it's kind of a loaded word. And how does that really happen? And this model, it talks about having this inside-out kind of gesture, right? Like you really need to connect to yourself and change how you think and perceive, and then discover your true kind of purpose, and then you co-create with others because nobody can do this alone, and in this process you kind of help one another co-evolve. And so what we've been able to apply this model in our design and facilitation of our community of practice by bringing people together to really understand what's our intent and what's really going on in the current state, And what's our true purpose? Speaking of shifting from performance to understanding your purpose, and how might we create the new together? Just one dashboard prototype at a time, and to ultimately being able to help one another evolve from being data blind in government to being able to actually using interactive dashboards to drive a performance improvement. And so just putting the image here, but there's a lot of richness and wisdom in this model. It's built off of MIT, and it's based on interviewing a lot of creative professionals and how do they really create the new. And I love, there's a quote, I think from Larisa mentioned the other day, that the ambiguity of authority and uncertainty of purpose create the conditions for unleashing our highest creative potentials. And so in a way, in government, we have to deal with a lot of ambiguity of authority and lack of clarity of purpose, but that if you reframe that, it really allows us to be creative. And this is a model that we found to be particularly helpful in unleashing our creative selves as individuals and as a community.
Awesome. If you leave that there for just a second, just before we flip, we really tried to be very careful about attributions in our slides and also provide these links because we hope you'll go on the same learning journey that we did. We had so much fun discovering these things. And the Theory U has, I think it's one of the biggest online open source courses there is. There's like 20,000 people participate all at once, and they'll be starting up again in September. So if you're watching this webinar and you're like, what can I do next? We encourage you to go there and sign up for that course together and just practice all this. Yeah, the U Lab. Okay, so any rate, if this is about reframing. One of the great metaphors that we got from Otto Scharmer and Arawana Hayashi when we went to study with them, they have this amazing discovery, and they show the video of the astronauts leaving Earth and only being able to behold the beauty of Earth from a distance, and being able to kind of turn that telescope back on yourself and take a look at yourself again. And so I'm looking again at our events, and we didn't know what we were doing, frankly, when we started out. And we're so thankful to the State Auditor's Office, to the University of Washington, the Municipal Research Service Center, because they funded this research, and research by definition is risky. You don't know what you're going to find out. And thank goodness we had, a researcher of Chelsea's caliber to document this. But I'm reflecting back and I'm like, oh my gosh, we went into that you kind of bottom out. You go into that deep, dark cave and go, oh my gosh, I hope we can do this because we got the public trust and important stuff. And the truth is that we're all figuring it out together. It's a nonlinear curve. It's more like a figure eight. We keep going back and forth. Can you go to the next slide? And it really, we kind of reverse engineered our secret sauce, our recipe. And we just we took data, we took a lot of data at every event, and people just couldn't explain, can you go back to the one for just a moment, why, like there was this special feeling. It's, people would say, oh, it's the vibe, you had to be there. I can't explain it. It's like the way they use the Slido interactive polling and the small groups at the tables and the thought leader. And all of that kind of comes together to create this momentum that has a lasting effect. And now, so here's the big reveal on our secret recipe. It's like we discovered we were repeating a pattern that we didn't even know. It's actually every time we had a thought leader to kind of shake up your brain and stimulate your thinking, get some stuff loose. Then we had local examples, and this was huge. It builds the confidence. People are like, hey, I know that guy, Michael. If he could do it, maybe I can do it. Super, super key to see somebody like yourself pulling this off. Not an expert, somebody just like you. And then in the workshop, right there, not like go read the book and try it later, hands-on. Like you never leave our workshops without actually doing a little bit of it right in the workshop. And some percentage of them actually, those little scribbled napkins leave our workshops and then become the webinar or whatever, it's like you're done. And the next slide just shows that we started out really focused on performance, particularly lean and dashboards, but we have just grown and expanded, and all of these bodies of knowledge swirl together to create this idea of a noble and awesome and a shiny government. And you see the next slide, you'll see the whiteboard from our friend Lisa's office. You know, we were like, oh yeah, all this stuff goes together. These are all individual communities of practice, but they're in this big umbrella. And that was another really important shift for us. It was like, you know, you can't have the lean geeks over here, and then the dashboard geeks over here, and then the, you know, Patrick Lencioni people and the Crucial Conversations people. We got to all work together to make this happen. And then Chelsea made an amazing visual of that.
Right. So this is one of the first kind of conceptual drawings that I showed Larisa, and it was based on my you know, couple years of experience working in government, and just observing that there are a lot of really interesting approaches to the task of improving government, but they're kind of all working in silos or in disparate places. But what I saw was, you know, we were all trying to kind of improve government, but just from different angles. But what happens if you could, you know, come together? And so we're making a case here that to improve government, to improve performance, we need integrated strategies rather than competing or isolated tools. So this is our attempt of creating that integration, and it's documented in this little booklet we're calling the Strategies for a More Joyful Government. And we are actually putting out an updated edition later this month as well. And you can, all of the things that we mentioned and more are in this book. And we think that it's about, you know, being able to, you know, bring things like systems thinking and priority-based budgeting and liberated meetings, and all those ingredients will help us do what we really came here to do, which is to make government work better.
Yeah. And can you just go backwards for 1 second? Because I just want to talk about how we made that logo, right?
Sure.
You know, it was such a breakthrough for us to think about not being in it for ourselves or winning the award. The awards are awesome because they make you try hard and practice. And at the same time, we hit upon this metaphor of the murmuration. And that is a picture, that's 186,000 local government bureaucrats rising as one. That's what all those little individual dots are. And our last slide, maybe we could just end on this one and take it for questions, because we can bring in our seventh insight if people really want to hear it. I think we should pause, because I think we go to 15 more minutes, right? We have 15 minutes of Q&A.
Yes. Question.
But I just want to say that this was another iteration that emerged, and we didn't have time. We really wanted to show. If you download the booklet, you'll see that it is full of extremely colorful illustrations. And those illustrations are created by our fantastic visual graphic artist, Jessica Reel. And that also was a key ingredient for our success. You know, people would just they would watch their conversations come alive, and they would say, wow, we said that, we made that. And it was like, yeah, absolutely. And that's just an important aspect of what we're doing. And you'll be able to see all of that on our website. And we're all about putting the heart back into government. And I don't know, you're going to show us some stuff, or we're going to go to Q&A. I'm not quite sure where we are, but I'm so glad to have arrived here together on time.
Yeah, let's take questions.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, well, this is Amy back with you, and we have a question in the queue, but I want to also remind everybody that we'd love to hear your voice, like literally. So if you would like to, it doesn't have to be a question, make a comment, add to any of this, add your story, or ask a question, just hit that hand icon, and we will call you by first name and unmute you. Otherwise, feel free to type in your thoughts and questions in the written question pane. So in the meantime, so John asked a question here about the approach. So he says, does the more collaborative, less judgmental approach that you are recommending help with the problem that we sometimes find in performance measurement? of folks spending a lot of time just thinking up kind of clever ways to manipulate their statistics and make their scores look better. Yeah,
Sure,
Kelsey.
and I will take a first stab. So that's a function of using data in government to produce scorecards. Right? Ultimately, you want to look great on your scorecard because that's what you're judged on. But we're saying the shift happens when you can think of that as using data to inform improvement. And what happens when it's interesting that jurisdictions that really kind of evolve to that point of using data to inform improvement is that the people that they fear will criticize them when they put out a dashboard that shows a lot of red. Is that they don't really care. They're just like, oh, but we want you to know that you have something, you have a problem, and so it really. I think it's not as bad as people think, right? When you can put your data, the truthful data, out there, and what's important is to really make that mental shift that this is not about showing people. You need to do that too in government, but for practical purpose of improving the day-to-day, you want to be using data as a something to drive as in a dashboard.
Cool. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Yep.
would,
Go ahead, Larissa.
oh, well, you can go on a different question, or if there's room, I'll add to that.
Well, so I don't have another question in the queue, so let's go ahead and add to that, and would love to hear more questions, guys. Yep.
Great. Yeah, so Michael knows this because this confounded us a lot in our early conversations. I mean, the risk of gaming the numbers, it's not, the risk is much greater than just getting the numbers wrong. I mean, credibility and integrity are really important values. The people who are attracted to work in government hold those values, and there is something about the expectation when citizens cede their power and authority and resources to the whole, they have an expectation of trust and credibility. So when you get into that gaming the numbers stuff, there's a lot at stake. And the antidote, that's driven by fear. That's driven by fear. That's what is at the core of that kind of behavior. People are scared of being judged. They're scared of being, ridiculed. And they're scared of being not valuable to the community, to the village, basically not invited to the campfire. And that's not a joke. That is not anything small. That is actually your brain, your amygdala goes on hijack, and you can't do anything creative at that point. There's no ingenuity, innovation, performance breakthrough coming out of that pile of muck. So to John's question, yes, absolutely. And not only is it an approach, but I thank you for naming it that, because we do feel like it's a different way of coming to this conversation. It's a practice, right? You kind of got to pour it on. You don't just like accidentally remember to celebrate people. You have to be very diligent and repeat it and practice, finding out what's good. Highlight what's going well. Learn how to get the wheels of your brain and government turning and smoothing. You pour on the oil of like, that was good too. How'd you figure that out? And you kind of change the questioning from like, what the heck is wrong with you, from that's so cool, how did you do it? And then the whole posture goes from like sitting back with the arms crossed and like trying to make sure you don't get into trouble, you get a little bit more neutral, then your curiosity catches you, and then you're hooked. Then you're like leaning in, because the only thing that will get humans out of fear is their curiosity, right? They're the one thing that will overpower fear. Love is the antidote, but curiosity is the door that opens, Otherwise, why do we go into space or like down to the bottom of the ocean? That's like crazy. That you should totally be scared of that, but humans do it because deep down inside, we're curious. And if you can kind of turn on that kind of thinking and make those light bulbs go off with your performance, then you're just going to have to get out of the way, because people just want to make it better and better.
Yeah, cool. Okay, a couple more questions
I'd
coming
like,
in. No, go ahead. Yep.
Oh. Yeah, so I think we're in a little bit of a moment here, in the sense that I picked up at the ASPA conference, and I know Barrett and Green are actually working on a book talking about the next generation of performance systems. And I was on webinar as a presenter earlier this week with Martin O'Malley, from Baltimore, who helped set up the original city stat model. And a lot of the second generation or the next iteration of performance is, putting a spotlight on the data will get you some improvement. There is no doubt about that. But that's, I think, where much of the improvement ends. If the only motivation is how do I look in front of my boss, and that fear and accountability is the driver, you will get improvement. Stat systems across the country have shown that. But do you get breakthrough improvements? Do you get radically new ways? Do you get innovation emerging from those? Not necessarily. And so this next generation thinking about stat, about integrating lean, thinking about what's motivating people, thinking about the human dimension of performance. As public servants, we are showing up every day, not because it's the best paycheck in town. I've got Amazon down the street. I'd make more money working for them. But the commitment to do something in the public service is huge, and that we actually have evidence that can show that we're making progress on important values and goals and results for the community is much more powerful than the boss yelling at someone or saying, you didn't meet your target. So those are the things that GPC and Larisa and Chelsea are really talking about tapping into at a very human level, stuff we're not usually comfortable talking about in the public sector, right? Maybe we'll take our crucial conversations training and then go back and not talk about the difficult things. These guys are talking about, surfacing these more difficult issues, which is part of what I would argue is sort of a cultural transformation that many of us are trying to seek, even if the structures and the politics and the accountability systems aren't necessarily as mature as some of the thinking is around these issues.
Very good. Awesome. Okay, a couple more questions have come into the queue here, and just kind of piggybacking on what we're already talking about here. But Milton says, from my experience, most people want to do good or better. To the earlier question, the key to success is top leadership. How do you suggest we approach senior leadership to accept, he says, that everything may not be green?
As usual, I always pause because I like, ooh, pick me. I have an answer. But plus, I just love that name, Milton. There's something about that name that's special. Okay, double-pronged strategy. Number one, if you really want to help your senior leader look cool, then you bring them the data and you bring them a story. I mean, you basically just help them look good by being the kind of person who owns up to things and has some kind of response. So what Chelsea said earlier, and I think Michael was echoing on that, it's like, okay, when I worked for Governor Gregoire, 3 different political directors were like, they were ready to take me out. They're like, wait, you're going to put the governor in a room with a bunch of pictures of how government is screwing up? I don't think so. Okay, you're going to open those meetings to the public? I don't think so. You're going to invite the journalists and the union reps? We're not doing that. Well, I get it. Why? They thought that was insane to do. But here's what happened. And she was just willing to do it. As soon as she did it, people were like, hey, she's paying attention. She's running the ship of government. She's noticing when things are red, yellow, and green. And nobody was really paying attention to any of the, the deficits. Right? They were just kind of excited that it's not like people think government's all green. It's not. They know better. It's like, of course there's always a problem. Government exists to solve problems we have created in our social dynamics of humans. So we should always expect that. And then the leader, if you want to appeal to sort of their, the potential for them to look good, I would say bring them the data and bring them a story. Second prong to that strategy, who cares about the leaders? Let's do this for ourselves, right? Those 186,000 bureaucrats rising as one, there's only a few at the top. The rest of us can get together and share this information and make stuff better. And I encourage us all not to wait for the leader to lose their fear or get engaged. There's so much we can do just between us.
Okay,
and
so
I think on that note, maybe we should talk about the shift from hero to host. I think we didn't get to talk about that.
Okay, before, I'm sorry, to Milton, I think felt like he maybe was misunderstood. Maybe I didn't present it right.
Oh,
Milton, I'm gonna unmute you. Would you like to speak verbally?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. You're on, Milton.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm actually retired, and the strategies that you talked about are ones that I've used in trying to get things accomplished. What I'm seeing here is a great deal of positive effort getting people within communities and across communities talking together and sharing ideas. The thing is that for some of the things that I'm seeing now that I've come back to school is a broader cultural shift that needs to happen both within people doing day-to-day work, but also in terms of the leadership that enables and supports them. And my focus was more upon the types of efforts that you folks are doing in terms, I mean, you can go out and create a lot of enabling among the people that are doing the day-to-day work, and these are key skills. But I've also seen leadership that if you tell the truth, you'll be persecuted for the truth. And so I'm curious about efforts in terms of trying to preach to senior leadership in terms of being more open and enabling of their folks to actually improve the ship of state.
yeah. Thank you. I'm so glad, Amy, that you opened up the microphone and to hear your voice. And we did kind of misinterpret that question. And this is a perfect example of not making assumptions and slowing down and listening to what one another are really trying to say. So I'm going to try to respond to this and answer the other question I see in the box in like 60 seconds, and also respect Chelsea's desire to land on our last insight. I will say absolutely there is a way to cultivate the ability to have compassion and courage even when you might be feeling frightened, and also to radiate that courage and compassion from the inside out as a leader. And one of the workshops that we offered at the very beginning of this year was called Search Inside Yourself. And it's a leadership institute that is designed exactly to train leaders to be able to do this. And I appreciate the question, and that may not answer everything, but I did want to just lay that out there, that you are not alone in seeing that leadership, and that all of us, each of us is a leader, and we all need to cultivate those skills, and it is possible to do so. I also see in the chat box that someone was asking about low public engagement. I'm so glad you asked. One of our featured presentations on Tuesday was about a radically different way to engage citizens in setting the priorities and paying attention to government. And we were getting, speaking of data, feedback like 91% of the people felt their elected officials heard them and would pay more attention to government. People wanting to bring neighbors, children, friends, of all persuasions to the community conversations. And we'll just figure out a way to share more information with you via the links. So appreciate the questions. Love the questions.
Yeah,
So,
shall we bring it on home?
Yeah, I'll just say it's at the City of Olympia, and we'll make that resource available at the end of our slides. We'll just update
because
that.
It's Stacey Ray, 2018.
Exactly. So we'll add that link to here. Just come back to download the final version of the slides, and you'll get the link. Okay, so from hero to host.
Yeah.
You want me to explain what this is?
No, you go. Yes, please.
So Larisa and I used a lot of Play-Doh at the beginning when we were trying to figure out what is this thing we were trying to create here. And so on the right-hand side was my sculpture of the future that I saw we were calling forth, and on the left was Larisa's. And I guess I would just explain what I was doing. I was doing this ideal of a drop in the pond that creates a movement. And I saw the two of us as two droplets in the pond, and trying to start something and creating these concentric circles and spread out the new. And we didn't know at the time what we were going to bring forth, but now we can articulate it's about joy in government. It's about really bringing people together to better see, appreciate, and learn from one another. And the key shift for us here was from this idea that I can change it all to we need one another, and we need someone who can host that kind of community, who can provide, as the questioner was saying, the enabling conditions for people to do this everywhere. Larisa, what's your story of this sculpture?
Well, mine started out with the mud. That's the brown part. Mud is a metaphor for what I was really trying to make there with the Play-Doh. A key ingredient of anybody's researcher kit. And just the fact that the way that Chelsea and I work together was a reflection of how we're inviting other people to work together, to have a little more humility even as we're striving together. I really could not have extracted this lotus, that's the pink part, out of the mud. That was Chelsea's ingenuity, her ability to see what we were doing together. And frankly, I was just tired of trying to be the hero, and I'm darn stubborn. So it took a long time for me to kind of lay down my arms, meaning my weapons, and open up my arms and my heart. And through that, we have been able to achieve so much more than we ever thought was possible. And I'm so grateful for our partnership and for what this little evolution that we have started. And to our hosts today, Amy and Michael, thank you so much for inviting us to share our story.
Thanks to both of you. I hope people are able to access the resources, the book, the other links. There's a lot more there. And feel free to reach out to Larisa and Chelsea afterward to see about establishing networks and communities of practice in your own area. This is a very powerful and effective way to make change and to feel supported in this changing world and changing governmental structure. Thanks so much for your time and your participation today.
Thanks,
everyone.
Thanks, all. I feel grateful to have been a part of it. So thank you, everybody. Chelsea, Michael, Larisa. Well, I'll keep it short here, but we're going to say goodbye. We will, you'll see a survey launch when we exit here. We promise we read it. We try to act upon it. We want to hear from you. So I look forward to the results, and everybody have an awesome afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.